Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It is nearing lunch time, so I won't take up much of your time. I'm Praseetha from Government Medical College, Thrissur. So today I will be speaking about a very simple but relevant topic, that is handling of common and costly equipment. All of us are depending on equipments daily, on a daily basis in our OT, and you are the people who are handling the equipments mostly, and we always look forward to you people to give us and provide us with the right equipments. So how do you handle a common or a costly equipment? So why this topic was chosen was that equipments are the most important part of the daily patient care routine in our OTs. So why is an equipment important? Because it is always related to patient safety. You want to keep the patient safe, you need a pulse oximeter, a ECG monitor, and end-tidal carbon dioxide. So basic monitors are always recommended by the ASA to keep the patient safe. And for convenience and economy, you want to know when the patient is coming out. You can use a gas analyzer, you can use a BIS. So for the convenience of using and for the economy, because you don't want to waste resources, you can use, you can minimize, you can reduce on your cost, and by improving the patient safety and reducing complications, you can always cut down the cost of surgeries. And while handling these equipments, we are shifting equipments from ICUs and OTs. We are using them on different patient groups. So there is a possibility of cross-contamination and infection in the OT. So you can reduce infection also by proper handling of the equipments. And moreover, most of our equipments are costly. So what happens is that if you don't care for them, the life of the equipments will get reduced and you have to invest a lot in the equipments. So when are the damages happening? Usually the damages to equipments happen during transport of the equipments, especially if you are moving an ultrasound machine from your ICU into the OT for a procedure. Like that, similar situations you can have a damage. And when you're assembling components, like a flexible bronchoscope, if you're attaching a camera source, you are attaching a light source to a bronchoscope, all these points, if you are not careful enough, you can damage the equipment. And while handling equipments, like our common equipments like laryngoscope, etc., you can damage them. And while cleaning and sterilizing these equipments, you can always cause damage. So whenever you transport equipments, whichever equipments are mounted on a stand, you try to move them like that itself. Don't try to unmount from the stand and use. And all equipments which have a tendency to fall down, you should strap them so that it doesn't tip while you are transporting. So what precautions do you take during transport of machines? Always you take precautions rather than damage a machine and go for its repair. So always you think about what all things can happen. So even when you have a machine which is mounted on a trolley, you will think that it is a equipment which is designed to move. That is, you can move it freely around, but always think that there is a possibility of the equipment falling down. So when you are planning to shift an equipment from its source, always scan the path for obstacles so that your equipment doesn't tip and fall. And whenever you are moving, you should not run, especially around corners in your OT or your hospital complex. You scan the path and you walk at a steady pace. Don't run around with equipments. And avoid bumpy floors and paths. Why? Because the delicate electrical connections, example for the motherboard of an ultrasound machine, etc., will get damaged if you handle them carelessly. And whenever an equipment has a wheel, it is meant to move freely. So you clean the wheel so that the machine or the equipment is free to move around and rotate. And always, when you're transporting equipments like ultrasound machine, you keep the cables secure. Don't let them drag on the floor. And the electrical cords also, you keep them safe so that they do not drag and cause damage. And when you're transporting very sensitive equipments, store the fragile parts. For example, an ultrasound probe while shifting a machine, it can be kept in a padded container while you are transporting the machine. So when you are on a daily basis, we are handling lot of equipments. So what all damages can occur and how do you care for your equipments? We classify them as common and costly, but no equipment is can be classified as common because the pulse oximeter we use daily, it is a very life-saving equipment. So you cannot handle it carelessly. So when you're assembling components, especially when you're switching, you are connecting an invasive BP monitor to your not used routine monitor, you will have to plug into the console. So in that stage, that is when damages happen. Always remember that many of our equipments don't have to be twisted or turned. They just have pins. You can see in the picture. This is a picture of a damaged pin. If you look carefully, 2 or 3 pins are broken because of improper handling. You can see the pins have not been aligned and somebody has twisted it to clockwise or anti-clockwise just to ensure a secure connection. So for all such devices which do not need twisting, which are not threaded, you have threads on equipments which have to be turned, like a lever lock. You know that it is threaded. So all other equipments, please do not twist or turn. Just align the pins to the slot and push into the socket. And always remember that the cables of all equipments should not be lying on the floor. So just to mention a few things about our commonly used equipments. One is a multipara monitor. You should always avoid tipping because sometimes we are moving the machine from the head end to the foot end. For a neurosurgery, we might be pushing our machine after induction of a GA to the foot end of the patient. So in that case, if you are not careful, your monitor has a chance to tip and fall. So it may be strapped if you are lacking manpower. It can be strapped during your rotation and movement. And whenever you are using, most of our monitors have touch screens. So do not use pen or other instruments to press on the buttons of the monitors or on the touch screen. And avoid oil or grease in your fingers because it can reduce the sensitivity of the screen. And when you are wearing gloves, ideally you should not be using gloves which you use on the patient to touch the monitor because you are acting as a source of infection. So the person who touches the monitor, if he is gloved, the sensitivity of the touch screen will be reduced and you have a tendency to press more and more when it is not working. So in that way, you will damage the touch screen of a monitor. And no adhesive plasters on the monitors or the machines because they will collect dirt in the future. And always after use, you should keep your equipment free of dust and moisture. On the picture on the right hand side, you can see how adhesive plasters have been stuck to make the connections tight of the monitoring cables. So this is not advisable. See, this is a picture taken from our emergency OT few days back. You can see the cables lying, ECG cable, especially if you note here, you can see the ECG cable lying on the unsupported from the OT table. So this is a very poor way of handling this equipment. You can see other monitoring lines touching the floors. They have been randomly put on the floor carelessly. A person can tip over, our OT personnel, healthcare workers can tip over this. And another thing is, whenever there is a pull on these cables, the delicate electrical wires inside these cables get snapped. And your monitor will not work in the future. And you can see very carelessly, the NIBP line is wound on a IV infusion stand. And somebody tries to move the stand, you know what happens to this monitor. So whenever you're using ECG and pulse oximeter and other monitors, you always keep the cables untangled. That is, you should not twist or turn them, and there is a tendency for always to keep the ECG when it is, somebody has put after a case, nobody is interested to straighten the cables and put them back on the patient. They will put it as it is onto the next patient. So whenever after a case you unentangle all the cables, keep them straight, and when applying to the next patient, you keep them free of tangles and keep them supported. You don't let the cables hang freely from the OT table and never to be put on the floor. Pulse oximeter probes, as we commonly use on our extremities, that is upper limb or lower limb, they have a tendency to fall when the patient starts getting out of anesthesia, or if it is a pediatric case, child who is struggling, the pulse oximeter probe may get displaced from the limb and it will fall down. Each time the pulse oximeter probe falls down, you have a spring mechanism which helps the probe to attach to your finger. So that spring mechanism will get lost eventually, and the contact with the pulse oximeter probe will not be accurate, and so your reading will get compromised, and eventually you will have to replace that probe. So whenever you are using a pulse oximeter probe, you attach it to the limb of the patient so that it does not fall down each time with the patient movement. For NIBP cuff, I have seen numerous things on the NIBP cuff, like threads, fibers from the linen, patient's hair sometimes. So please clean all those things from the NIBP cuff, and you protect the bladder of the NIBP cuff from sharp pricks so that there is no leak when you are measuring the blood pressure. And common thing seen with ETCO2 lines is, especially for side stream ETCO2 monitors, you can see that the cables are bending, lines are bending at especially close to the ETCO endotracheal tube, the lines keep bending and you will not get a proper tracing. And also look for moisture in the lines when you have to change the lines. See, this is a ECG cable which has snapped off because of improper use. You can see on the left side, one of the lines has snapped off. So you have to replace this entire cable now. So this is the problem with improper handling. Somebody might have stepped on it, so it might have snapped off. So you can see a pulse oximeter probe on the right side, which you can see it has numerous plasters wound around it. Why? Because it has been repeatedly falling. The spring mechanism to keep it intact on a finger is lost. So you can see how equipments are being damaged. And about the anesthesia machine that we commonly use, always keep the machine braked so that it does not move around. And somebody is anesthetizing the machine does not shift. The wheels of the anesthesia machine, if you observe, you have difficulty in moving the anesthesia machine means your wheels are not properly serviced. So once you remove the brakes, the anesthesia machine should move freely. So you have to clean the wheels of the machine regularly so that the machine moves around easily. And after each case, you have to wipe the surface of the machine. And some OTs, nowadays we don't use fumigations in the OT for sterilization. But in olden days, we used to have formalin, glutaraldehyde, etc. for fumigation. So whenever you are using fumigation, these machines have to be put outside the OT because they are not supposed to, workstations are not supposed to be exposed to such disinfectants. And most commonly in our hospital especially, we have seen damages from heavy impact, like trolleys, patient shifting trolleys coming and hitting on the machine. Or a SIA machine, because you have not taken care of your machine, and these people, other people who are pulling the trolley and operating the CM are not concerned about our anesthesia machine. So naturally they will have a tendency to hit the machine. And always when you're shifting a machine from one place to another, remember the things about the transport. So you can see in this picture anesthesia workstation. In the upper figure you can see the selector switch for open and close circuit intact. But in the lower one you can see a connector switch is broken. It is not possible to humanly damage this switch unless you are some Bahubali or something. But this switch has been hit by a patient transfer trolley, and this machine has been now not in use. It is kept there for repair. So coming to another common part on our machine, which is a vaporizer. So vaporizers are, you regularly use vaporizers. You can see at a times we mount 2 vaporizers on a workstation. So vaporizers, whenever you are shifting vaporizers or mounting them or handling them, always maintain in the upright position so that the vapor doesn't tip over. Even though our tech machines have a tipping prevention mechanism, it is recommended that always the vaporizers during transport, mounting and removal should be kept upright. And always follow the color coding when you are using vaporizers, and use filling systems which are dedicated for each agent. do not overfill. You have a viewer port in your vaporizers where there is a maximum level indicator. You do not fill beyond that point. And when you're using two vaporizers like this attached to a machine, always check that at a time you should be able to open only one vaporizer. You try to open the next vaporizer, it should not open. That is the Selectotech safety feature for if you are able to open two vaporizers at a time, you have to remove them and remount them and check the device. And when you open the vaporizer, you can see a dial here and a release button. So you check that these things are working very smoothly. When you push the release button, you should be able to open the vaporizer by turning the dials easily. And you check for the drainage system, which is to drain the excess vaporizing agent. You have to check for the drainage system, and one of the major problem is when you're improperly mounting a vaporizer is leak from the machine. So you will start anesthetizing a patient and you will know that you have done a machine check, but somebody mounted a vaporizer after your machine check. So you are starting to give GA. The bag doesn't fill, you are not able to ventilate the patient. This has happened innumerable times. And when you check back, it is the vaporizer which will be leaking. One common sight is if you have filled the vaporizer, the filling port is not tightened accordingly, there will be leak from the filling system. And one thing about vaporizer is you have to regularly, at regular intervals, you have to check the output. If you are using a gas analyzer, so to some extent you can understand the output concentration of the vapor, but still you have to verify the accuracy and you have to calibrate the vaporizers in a time specified manner. So this is a very common equipment that you use regularly, and you can see on the right hand side you can see a Macintosh blade with missing light bulb. So whenever a laryngoscope doesn't work, what do we do? A direct laryngoscope doesn't work. The common thing is we try to change the batteries. But when I was a postgraduate student, even I did that. I tried to adjust the bulb of the laryngoscope to have a good vision or a good light. But I'll try to loosen the screw of the bulb, tighten it more and see where the optimal lighting is. But always remember that if you're trying to loosen the bulb to adjust the intensity of the light, there is a tendency that the bulb may become a foreign body during your laryngoscopy and it may fall into the larynx. So there you have an emergency airway situation. And you can see on the left side, because of the improper mounting and handling, one of the screws has been lost from this. So you cannot connect a handle there. And you can see the screws of the other laryngoscope blade handle is also getting damaged. And one thing about laryngoscopes is that we always clean the blade of the laryngoscope, but the handle should also be cleaned in between patients, because most of the doctors will be using gloved fingers and they will transfer all the contamination or possible infection to the handle also. So in between cases, remember to clean the handle also. So this is a very costly equipment, a video laryngoscope, which has been our savior during the COVID epidemic. So you can see on the left side how the assembly has been damaged, because it looks like somebody tried to remove the screen from the body of the handle rather than removing the blade part. So somebody without a knowledge of working of this machine has damaged this. So video laryngoscopes are very sensitive equipments and very precious in our OTs. So so you know, unless you're trained or you have a knowledge of its parts or its working, you will not be able to assemble it properly. Somebody has tried to remove the blade and they have damaged it at this point. Now it is beyond repair. So this is a common situation that we see, especially your difficult airway adjunct like bougies or tube exchangers. They have been stored in very unhygienic and bad manner. So whenever possible, you store them in the containers designed for them. If you are keeping it exposed, you're putting them into the trachea of a patient, you transfer infection also. Excuse me. And also, the quality of the equipment will also be lost. These are simple, very simple things, but I took them randomly from our OT. Excuse me. Next is a defibrillator, very precious equipment that and a life-saving one, especially in a situation of cardiac arrest. So keep the defibrillator always clean and decontaminated because you are using it for multitude of situations. Sometimes you may use it for a trauma patient, sometimes you may use it for an elective procedure. So there is every chance that it may be contaminated. So keep it decontaminated after every use. And you check whether the cables of the defibrillator are intact, the switches, the power switches especially, and your selector switches for the energy levels, are they working? And how is the display of the monitor of the defibrillator? How is the power cord? Is it okay? Does it have any exposures or any wires are exposed? Paddles, how are the paddles? You can see on the right side, because this may have happened when the paddles must have fallen down during resuscitation. One of the paddle is fully damaged. And always remember, some equipments which work on electricity, they have a tendency to heat up. So those machines will be provided with a vent and a fan inside to cool. So if you have dust or fibers clogging the vent, the equipments get heated up and they get damaged. So always clean the air filters and vents. And you have to check your defibrillator in between. Daily you have to do a low energy check with a 30 joules. That is recommended for daily check. Daily morning you have to check your defibrillator. There is a weekly check protocol and a biannual check. That is by the manufacturer. So coming to another costly equipment which we use commonly in our OTs now is a ultrasound machine. So it is costly and it is sophisticated to use and assemble. So whenever you are using an ultrasound, if you don't know and you are not trained with using this machine, seek the help of a trained technician, so rather than handling it without knowledge. So when the ultrasound machine, just like I said, because it has an electronic board, a motherboard, and all those things, it has to be kept at an ambient temperature. So there will be a vent for that. Air filters are there. You have to keep the air filters and the vents clean of dust. Otherwise, that function will be lost and the equipment will have a reduced life. You can see how dust has collected in this ultrasound machine. This is not from our hospital. It is from outside. And so how you can see how it can block the vents and filters of the machine. So, and the transducer is a very key component or a crucial part of the machine, which the part which we are using around and we are moving around. So, inspect the transducer for breaks or cuts on the probe, especially on the imaging surface. And why this is important is that when you are cleaning the probe, the disinfectants will seep through these cuts and pores and it will damage the probe permanently. And the transducer, when you connect it to the machine, you look at the pins for bends and damage and broken wires which may be exposed. Secure the probes. Thank you. Secure the probes well, and do not let the probes fall or get caught in between your OT table, your arm boards, etc. while you are doing your blocks and all. And whenever you use the probe cables, keep it straight and untwisted. And always clean and disinfect all these equipments as per the manufacturer recommendation. So you can see on the top figure, ultrasound probe, which is in our hospital now. You can see a small dent or a mark there on the probe. It might have been due to damage or maybe due to improper needling while doing a block. You might have hit the probe. So anyways, if you have such a damaged probe, the disinfectants can seep through this probe and eventually this probe will become malfunctional. And you can see the improper handling of this USG machine. You can see numerous scratch marks on the handles and maybe it is hitting somewhere, so the cables are being pulled over it. Anyway, it is not properly handled. So these are some tips for maintaining the ultrasound. So daily check of the ultrasound. At the start of the day, you have to connect it. Look for your cables and all. Then pay attention. You can find it in numerous protocols like this on your net. If you can follow one, it will be very useful to maintain your ultrasound machine. So pay attention to your transducer probes, They are very crucial. Just like I said, don't put them hanging on the floor and laying loose on the floor so that somebody gets stuck between your OT table and your arm boards like that. And always be careful. Somebody is performing a block. There is every chance that that person may be handling it lightly. So if there is somebody to help, like you people are around with us, don't let the probe fall down. And at the end of shift, you have to wipe your machine. You can check any damages has occurred during the day, document it and report it. And for it should be have a backup of the machine regularly. And preventive measures, you have to service your ultrasound regularly, and it will increase the life of your equipment. So we're coming to fiber optic bronchoscope. So this is very sophisticated equipment that will help in difficult airway situations. So always you store the FOB with your insertion cord straight. So you can see there are two ways of keeping your FOB. One is mounted on a stand console so that your light source, everything is assembled, screen, everything is assembled, and you can see your FOB hanging there freely. The bronchoscope, the insertion cord is hanging freely. But while transporting such a mounted FOB, you should take care that the cord does not hit anywhere. And this is our manufacturer recommendation of storing a flexible bronchoscope in a suitcase. So it is a well-padded suitcase. You can ship this easily. So avoid bending and twisting of the cord except the tip of the bronchoscope while you are cleaning or washing. And whenever you are using on the patient, always remember to use a bite block when you are putting it, especially orally. And look for overheating from the light source. In between, you can extensively, if you are keeping in the light source on, it may get heated. So check while sterilizing, how to sterilize the equipment, and tip movement should be checked. The suction channel should be checked. Daily check should be like that. And light source should be checked for working, and the white balancing should be done. You focus the fiber optic bronchoscope and lubricate only the shaft and not the tip of the scope while you are before loading the endotracheal tube. Just to summarize, equipments are life-saving gadgets. Most of the time, which equipment do we care most in our life? I have seen especially mobiles do not fall down, but ECG cables fall down, pulse oximeter probes fall down. But none of your mobiles keep falling down. Mine falls down every day. Every time I have a broken screen most of the time. But from the technicians and my PG students, the mobile rarely falls down. Why? Because you care for that. That is your own equipment. But these equipments are more important and life-saving. So please care for them also. And take precautions while you are transporting them, assembling them, and using them. And maintain a register. That is a very practical way. We have a register, but things don't work out always. So maintain a register for costly equipments. Follow strict protocols for cleaning and disinfection. If you're not aware of how to clean, you learn it first. Then you do it. Ask somebody, take a senior help. Learn how to disassemble an equipment, how to clean it, and how to disinfect. And one thing increasing the life of an equipment is a regular maintenance. So if you are regularly maintaining an equipment, the lifespan of the equipment will definitely increase. And whenever an equipment is damaged, some places you have to pay the cost of the equipment. If you are held responsible, imagine replacing an ultrasound probe or something. If it is found damaged during your shift, you are the one who will be responsible for it. So in that way, there is a lot of economical damage also. And thank you for listening to me.